Okay. All right. Good morning and welcome, everyone. Nancy. Good morning. We'll give another minute. I hope we see another few people of our 30 who signed up. Nancy, I'm going to ask you when we're at that moment, if you could lead the prayer for our opening.
Okay.
Joe and Nancy are our coordinators for Nurturing Communities Leadership. Joe isn't able to make this meeting, but we're really happy to have you with us, Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, and I will add, Toby, you're very much in there too. So yeah, I've actually been a little bit on leave this last year because of our new granddaughter that was born with some different health issues, and I'm helping to care for, but very much wanting to be a part of today. Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, I'll just give a welcome to everyone. This is the second of our series of 8 virtual roundtables in this winter and spring series of Nurturing Communities meetings to share with each other experience and questions and accumulated wisdom, perhaps, and the common seeking in matters of building blocks of Christian community. And it's always delightful and a joyful thing to meet brothers and sisters in the wider network. I know quite a few of you. Some I look forward to getting to know. So from the Nurturing Communities leadership team, today we have Nancy, who's, as I mentioned, with Joe in Waco, Texas at Hope Fellowship. And there are coordinators. And then Sam Durgan and I kind of jointly represent Ruderhof on the leadership team, and Debbie Baumgartner from Jesus People USA in Chicago. Any of us would be delighted to be in touch, in dialogue with any of you at any time, if we can be of support. And to all who are new to Nurturing Communities Network, a special welcome, and we hope you consider the additional meetings in the series coming up. They're about every 2 weeks, and the next one is on February 12, the same time on Saturday, and it's about celebrations in Christian communities. And then there's another one a couple weeks after that on the 26th of Feb about how intentional Christian communities relate to local churches. That'll be an interesting one. Okay, well, let us start with a prayer. And Nancy, if you would do that for us.
Lord God, we thank you so much for this space and time. Though we would have preferred to be in person, this allows us to be with brothers and sisters that we might not have the chance to be in person with. So we thank you for this opportunity, knowing, Lord, that love is that one marker that distinguishes us as your disciples. So we ask that our conversation here, you would be present, your spirit would be present among us, reminding us of the call on our lives, personally and in our communities and churches, calling us to further growth in those areas where we're weak, encouragement on this journey, that we all together would shine your light brightly in this very dark world. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. We will start with hearing from each one who's here. Let's try to keep it to under 30 seconds, just so we can get through and start the conversation. And let's share with the group who we are and any community affiliation, if we're, whatever that might be. And then briefly, what brings us to this meeting. I'm Toby Momsen, and with my wife Johanna, we live at the Platte Clove community of the Bruderhof Communities Network. And I'm going to ask you, Ted and Andrea, to go next. And each time, just ask someone else in line, anyone else, to be the next.
We're starting a new ministry in Crum, Texas, just outside of Denton, near the University of North Texas and Texas Women's University. About 60,000 college students live in the area. So what we're hoping to do is to build houses, actually provide housing for college students while they're going to secular school, live in Christian community. But it'll be a rent generating business, nonprofit, of course. And that's what we're trying to put together. And so far, I'd like to thank the NCN for providing us with what we really need, the foundation and the wording to help college students develop the basics for living together in Christian community.
And then we're also learning so much from you. Each gathering, we learn a little bit more to help us as we respond to God's call, and we faithfully go step by step, but it's often into territory that we don't know and don't understand, but just trusting God to lead and to provide and to guide. Praying that we can continually keep an open, learning, teachable mind and spirit as we go forward. And so we're very thankful for all of you, and to learn from this wonderful community, to learn from one another. So, okay, and we tag Josh.
Good morning, everyone. Josh Livingston from Indianapolis, Indiana, part of Englewood Christian Church at Mono de Amistad here. And I've also been in intentional Christian communities for most of my married life, and love being a part of these conversations, also because Nurturing Communities Network is a partner of what's called Cultivating Communities Initiative, which is something that was started out of Englewood Community Development Corporation, where I work out of, and our emphasis is on congregational formation, particularly in relation to the neighborhoods that churches are rooted in. So we're always interested in talking and exploring about those sorts of things. So yeah, that roundtable coming up in February, the second one in February, is going to be a very, I think, a very good conversation. I'm looking forward to participating in that. I'm going to pass it off to, I believe I've met Megan before in Reba.
Hi, I'm Megan Herring. I live at Reba. In Evanston, Reba Place Fellowship. I live at the Clearing. I'm here to learn from people about forgiveness and love, and to share my little tidbits of what I've learned in community. I'll pass it on to Beth.
Thanks, Megan. Good morning. My name is Beth. I'm at Englewood Christian Church in Indianapolis with Josh, and I've been here about 2 months, moved from a forming community in Fresno, California that I was a part of for about 2 years. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion this morning and just wanting to learn more from all of you and what's going on in your communities. And I will pass it to my friend Mary Lou in Portland.
Hi, Beth. It's good to see your face in the mix and hear what's up with you. Just want to say, Godwin's, your mission is really beautiful and inspiring, and throwback to like in the 70s when Tom Sine was talking about we need to think about other models for Christian, other than Christian colleges, right, where we can accompany kids who are in public institutions and supplement that with Christian formation. So I know that's not the point here, but it's very beautiful that you're doing that. I am in Portland, Oregon. Our community is about 14 years old here, with my husband Rusty. Yeah, we're just plugging along, doing the community thing here in Portland.
What's our purpose?
We are neighborhood based, live in close proximity to one another with a focus on our immediate neighborhood to love and care for. And really, the primary purpose is to be formed into more loving people ourselves, and to see Christ at work in our neighborhood. Oh, and I will say, let's see, we'll go to Noel.
Hi, yeah, so I'm from Winnipeg in Canada, and we are Grain of Wheat Church community, which is also like the Portland one. We are neighborhood based. We live mostly in one area, and it's a fairly poor area kind of neighborhood, although our enclave is not like, it's not like living what you think of when you think of inner city. We're close to it, but we have this sort of little lovely treed enclave that has grown up around, and some say the presence of Grain of Wheat in this area is what made that happen. The stability of people who cared about the area and cared about the people produced a neighborhood that was quite stable. And but we do want to be always thinking about how we can be Christ in the world, Christ in our world here. And I will pass it on to David Horn.
David,
not-
you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. You look unmuted,
Hey,
but we can't hear you.
David?
Hang on.
Okay, we can also have someone else introduce. David, are you able to speak?
I'll jump in. I'm Frank Winnan. I live in Durango, Colorado. I'm a member of this Zoom study group on the Sermon of the Mount called Following the Call. It's a 52-week study, and it's just absolutely amazing on how many people are thirsting and hungering to every week. And I can't think of his name right now. Tim Keiderling recommended that I check you out, Toby, and he gave me this link, and I'm thrilled to be here. So I'm a managing partner with Playforce.com, and they're not particularly Christian, but they just got a $5 billion contract in Africa to create these smart cities. And it's been, the Lord's been on my heart forever to figure out, to set up, to sort of be the one of the property owners that sells the property. In this case, it would be intellectual property, to help fund the ministries. Because the way I see it is that, like they in Acts 4:32, where they had to come together because their life depended on it. Someday soon, when the mark of the beast comes, we need to be ready and have all kinds of things in place if we're going to survive. And I don't hear anybody having this conversation. It scares most people. So, but I really want to be grounded in the Lord and His will, and find other brothers and sisters. Whether I start one here, whether I join one, whether I'm not sure yet. But I really want to be grounded in what you guys are doing, and see how we can be a benefit to each other. I'm very resourceful, and that I yield. Oh, let's see. Nate Durgan.
Hi, Frank. Thank you. Yeah, I live with my wife Rachel and our 10.5-month-old son here at the Woodcrest Broederhof. I've heard a lot about nurturing communities with the Broederhof involvement over the years, and I'm just looking forward to, hearing from you today, and hopefully I can also join for the next meetings. They sound like very interesting topics, so thank you very much. And I will pass it back to Mr. Horn. David Horn.
Is it working now?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Good. I guess the microphone on my old computer went out. Yeah, I'm David. Me, my wife, my daughter live in community here in the middle of nowhere in the Texas Panhandle. We provide a safe place for people to come and experience God's healing in a holistic way, and inviting people to come live in community with us. I guess we're too remote or something. We haven't been able to find anybody yet, but yeah, so that's who we are. I will pass it off to Hans Bayer.
I'm Hans Bayer, and Elijah Hess here from Little Bear Creek in Dayton, Ohio. I'm sorry I got in a little bit late. We're just a small community of about 6 or 7 of us and some children who live here on the outskirts of Dayton, Ohio, and are just trying to find our way, figuring out how to follow Jesus in a life that's shared together.
Last week, Hans's wife Esther and Jubal Bear are called in at the last conference, but it'll be Hans and myself, Elijah, today.
Welcome. Happy to have you with us, brothers, old friends. Who's next? Sam.
Okay, I'm Sam. Hello, everybody. I'm in Woodcrest. I'm Nate's uncle. I'm joining this call because forgiveness is such a cornerstone of living in community. I'm very interested in how you all are experiencing that. So very good to be with you on today. And I will pass this on to you, Garrett.
Okay, I'm Garrett, and I live with my wife, Lisi, in Northern Virginia. And we are connected to Sam through a weekly call to discuss Eberhard Arnold's book, Discipleship. And we're almost through with that. We're at the second to last chapter. And Daryl is also in on that call. And we've visited the Fox Hill property twice now. And so we're just curious to know where this conversation is going, and just to continue to be engaged in the practice of living out our faith in Jesus. And I'm not sure who has spoken. I'll pass it to Daryl. How about that? There we go.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
My name's Daryl Connolly, and I've been 2 months at the Woodcrest Broederhof community. And so I see Nate and Sam a lot. And I just wanted to also say that I have a family that I know who is interested in community, and they live near Dayton. So it'd be nice to get more information about your community and how they could probably connect with you. I'm interested in seeing what others' perspective on forgiveness and being a part of this network of other communities and hearing one another's story.
We haven't heard from Anna. Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. Yeah, my name is actually Samuel, but I logged in with my wife's ID, I think. So yeah, that's my wife's name, Anna.
Hi.
And yeah, I I've been to a couple of these network meetings before. Currently, I'm serving in a Korean immigrant church, and I've been always interested in Christian community, intentional community, and new monastic movement. So apart from my church work, I'm still working on my PhD, and I'm researching about intentional Christian community and new monastic movements in the States. I'm interested in this movement, as I said, and visiting a different community in the States. I want to learn more from your experience, and I want to.
Thank you. Are you in Atlanta? Appears to have frozen up perhaps, but hope it'll come back. All right. Who has still? Claire, we haven't heard from you.
Hi, I'm Claire Stober. I'm also from the Bruderhof communities. I happen to live in the Fox Hill community, and I came today because I am very interested in this topic and wanted to hear and learn from other people that live in community about it.
Thank you. So who have we not heard from?
Evan
Someone
and
just
Nancy.
joined us.
We haven't heard from Evan.
Okay, is that Samuel again? Evan, please.
Hi, my name is Evan Howard, and I live in Montrose, Colorado. And I do not live in community, though I have been friends with many communities, both very old and very new. And I'm always interested in learning from all of you. Thank you.
Excellent. Has anyone not introduced themselves?
Not yet, but I'll do it now if you like.
Yes, please.
I'm Finn Moritz, and, and I grew up in Denmark, where cooperatives are a big deal. And the last 10 years or so, I was in a church on Long Island, a congregational church, and that's where I kind of got my spiritual education. Finally figured out where I was on that scale. And I learned about the Hutterites, Amish, Mennonites, and Catholic workers and that on that journey. And so when I moved here to the Catskills Mountains in New York last year, I thought that the cooperative living would be a good next step for me. And you just don't learn things as well on your own as you do when you do it together with other people. And that's when I found Nurturing Communities Network, and so far so good.
Thank you. Well, it's great to come together for this sharing, and I hope we can now start sharing different experiences and any questions and thoughts on this topic. So our topic is what we phrased, the law of love and forgiveness. And we all know, as people seeking to follow Jesus, that he taught his disciples to live in peace with each other and to resolve their conflicts. If your brother has something against you, go and speak to him. And that instruction in Matthew 18:15, and also the many admonitions and instructions in the letters in the New Testament to speak truth in love. And so we know what Jesus asked and told us to do. It is very much harder to actually do it faithfully day to day than to speak about it or read about it. But we thought, I guess, all of us who have lived in community over time, for long or short times, have just found through experience, and often painful experience, how very crucial, essential it is to practice this law of love. And here in my community, the Bruderhof, this was written down as a rule, a house rule, in the very early years in the 1920s in Germany by our founder, Eberhard Arnold. And over the years has actually been hung up in homes and workplaces of Bruderhof communities as an admonition to speak straight to each other, to forgive each other, to not talk behind each other's backs negatively about anyone in our community. And we very often have to call each other back to it, to stop someone mid-sentence saying that's actually needs to be, you need to go direct and talk about this. And many times going to each other, asking forgiveness for not being faithful in this. So, you know, we've learned, and we've also, as we've had the opportunity to travel sometimes and visit other communities and others longing for life together, it just emerges as a really central, core, essential practice, a no gossip rule. We've just had many, my wife and I have had many times when we experience someone saying, you're the community with a no gossip rule. Tell us how it works. Now, we're surely not the only ones, and we would love to hear today from others in other communities around North America, your experience with this. And in the resources and in the resources we provide on the Nurturing Communities website, we've given you links to some of these, the actual wording of the law of love and forgiveness that the Bruderhof uses, also Hope Fellowship and also Englewood Christian Church. There's links to their expression of this. That's all I'd like to say in introduction. And then Josh Livingston, can you take it from here to kind of frame this conversation? I will say that if anyone, feel free to just unmute yourself and start talking. If you don't seem to get a chance that way, use the yellow hand flag in the reactions at the bottom of the screen to get our attention. And you can also type anything in the chat window. Just click chat and type to everyone, and we can respond to questions that way. So Josh, take it from here.
Thanks, Toby. Yeah, you've covered a lot of ground there. And I believe the last time this particular group met, I unfortunately wasn't able to be a part of it, but there was some good conversation about having a common cause, common vision for even coming together as a community. And so one of the beautiful things about Nurturing Communities Network is you kind of get folks kind of on all parts of that journey. And even on this call, you have people who have been living in community or been a part of communities that existed for over 100 years. You've got some folks that are just starting out, and kind of everything in between there as well. So within that scale, you have different expressions of maturity, different things in place, practices, habits. Some might go so far as to even say rule or laws. And so, yeah, existing communities often have practices or even promises which they make to one another about speaking the truth in love, as Toby was talking about, forgiving and asking for forgiveness when an offense is made. So I think what we want to do here is, given the quite amount of diversity that we have in this group, it would be wonderful to hear what sorts of expression, what sort of shape does these commitments take in your own communities? If you'd be willing to share, if this sort of rule of sorts exists in your community, and if so, how is it actually practiced and how does that work? And if not, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, I'll go ahead and go. I'm David. Of course, we have a really small community here. It's just me and my wife and my daughter and her kids, but I am part of a men's ministry that we build a community of men who want to transform their lives. And we have a way, the biggest issue is when conflict arises, and that's always going to arise when you have human beings involved. And we have times that we can hold one another accountable without judgment. We hold ourselves accountable. We also have a thing we call clean talk, which when you have an issue with somebody, it slows the conversation down and helps you own your judgments, what the real data is, what your wants are, what your emotions are. And it really helps in those times of conflict. Now, that doesn't really tie directly into forgiveness. Even with all those tools, I've seen men internationally known in transformation work that are excellent at this stuff act like teenagers. And even though they had these tools, what it came down to was you just have to forgive. I mean, that's hard to do. And it's hard to do in small communities. I know we were part of a small church that was as close to intentional community in the 90s as there probably that I knew about existed in Texas. We were a real small church. We were very, very tight. We ate together all the time. We did vacations together. I mean, it was incredibly close. And because of a lack of forgiveness, you just got to gut up and do it sometimes and just forgive people. Not give them passes necessarily, but forgive people. That church eventually wound up devouring itself because people couldn't forgive, people had agendas, and they weren't willing to live without judgment. So anyway, maybe that starts the conversation.
Yeah, we've been around for quite a long time, and we've had various phases. We were one community, and then we split into 3 communities for a while, and 2 of those didn't work, and came back and into the one community again. And in all those transitions, you can imagine all the movement, all the hurts, all the times that forgiveness was important. And in one of those transitions, actually, it was a Virgil Vogt from Reba Place came up to help us, talk through the stuff. And I just remember what he said that was very helpful to us at that time, that forgiveness is a decision. You don't always feel like it, but it's a decision, and it's one of the things that Christ wanted of us, like if that old saying of if we want peace in the world, it needs to begin at home. And for us, that really helped us to look at things differently. And then some of the basis of all that we did was reconciled relationships. If we couldn't move forward with reconciled relationships, then it was time to stop and think and work through some issues. And I'll give you maybe just a little example of, we had a bread co-op in our community, which was just internal. We all, Saturday mornings we'd get together and bake bread for people in our community and in the neighborhood as well a little bit. And then a couple of the families, there was an old bakery in the neighborhood that was for sale, and they got together and they purchased the bakery. So when they were starting up this little business, they went to the servant leaders and they asked, they brought their business plan and everything, and they asked for advice and they asked for a discernment. And the leadership certainly went through some of that with them, but then one of the servant leaders said, I'm not a businessman. I can't help you here, but I'm really interested to hear what's your conflict plan. And he had made them, that's Jake Pauls, as some of you may know, and he had them work through something. And the bakery is now 25 years old, something like that. I don't even know how old they are now, but a thriving business. And the owners say that that is what saved them, that conflict plan. And so sometimes taking time to use those tools that you were talking about, David, I agree, the tools themselves don't do everything, do they? But to sometimes think about, is this a little scratch? Is this a little irritation? Or is this something we really need to work through and figure out what's behind it? What are my fears behind it? What are, to speak openly about it? And so those are kind of some of the things we've learned over the years, and definitely a work in progress.
You have a copy of that conflict plan somewhere?
I'm not sure, I'd have to check.
Along with Noel, I so much agree with Virgil's comment, and that you made again about forgiveness being a decision. All of this, I think, is a commitment to a life journey, because we can have callings and rule of life kinds of places, right? But it just the idea over the years of the teaching, the small group times, discipleship formation times, really incorporating some aspect of this, which often I think revolves, in my experience, around communication. How are we, the verbal and the nonverbal, communicating with each other? Learning about ourselves a little bit more, the baggage that we all come with to community, to church, to, whatever group we're a part of. So yeah, not just seeing it as a one moment thing, or one, okay, I forgive you, or, kind of thing, or I'm not going to gossip about you, but boy, all these things are rumbling inside of me. But some way of continuing that journey and working, because as you have expressed, it's the undoing of everything. If we are not constantly, continually growing and going a little deeper in all these areas, and to the point of practices or whatever, those are helpful. And there are a number of ones that have been really helpful for us in Hope Fellowship. But bottom line, if we're not really deeply connecting with the Lord and Christ's Spirit, we're not going to have the wherewithal to do this lifelong sort of journey and growing and deepening that brings those profoundly great relationships over decades that a number of us can have after lots of conflicts, lots of forgiveness, on and continuing to grow deeper. So yeah, it's not in my experience, it hasn't been a rule book that okay, now I know what to do and it gets resolved, but it is a constant commitment to that long journey.
I would agree with that, Nancy. I feel like over the course of our life in community, I think we started off trusting the structures and the commitments primarily. Like, we're sort of like hardworking Anabaptist background. You just commit to something, you do the work, and you ask others to commit, and that's the core, And increasingly, I feel like in this school of conversion, we keep moving toward grace and toward more grace and toward more grace. And at the heart of it is grace, right? And that the structures and the disciplines are there to support that. But I think that there was a there was sort of a culture that initially was less healthy than what we have over time around our orientation toward the rules and the structure. And I'm sure that, you know, some people who left would criticize, would say that that culture was more oppressive than it was life-giving. And so that's, you know, been part of what we've learned. All that to say, there are some things, just really practical things, that we would say have endured and have been helpful on that foundation, right? Always coming back to that foundation. One is we have a practice of, especially in households, we have very few people now living in households together, but it's still a good practice. I think even in these closer relationships is, we used to do like regularly with our housemates, pet peeves and appreciations. And it was just expected that everyone would share pet peeves and appreciations, and that because they exist, right? And just normalizing that's what comes up. And, you know, how is it? How can we practice being more transparent? Because we're all very aversive, at least in our community, to conflict. You know, we're people pleasing bunch. We started, probably it was after one of the visitations, which someone can tell you more about visitations, but every 3 or 4 years we have visitors come and help us assess how we're doing. And they said, you all are too afraid to speak directly to one another. So we started monthly, what we called courageous conversations as a community. And we made a list of all of the topics that we were scared to talk about. And we said, we're going to talk about these. And we set up sort of a like guideline for how are we going to have these conversations? What are going to be the guiding, you know, like respectful and giving everyone a voice and et cetera, right? And that was, I think, really healthy for our community. There was another one I was going to mention. We did a training in nonviolent communication. Everyone read the book, and then we did try to do some practicing around that. And we still fall back on that sometimes when we have, you know, really difficult something to work through. It's similar to what someone else was saying around slowing things down when there really is there's a bump in the road that isn't going to be resolved through, you know, just lesser means, and often with a facilitator in the mix and saying, can we get to the bottom of what are the needs that are being unmet here? What are the emotions? How can we make space for everyone's experience and validate that and figure out how we can move on? Really, it's a way to make practical loving one another in relationally. So yeah, we call, interestingly enough, our little small groups, we call tilling groups, and that stands for truth and love. Isn't that cute? Tilling the fertile soil. But I would say from the get-go, understanding, and something that we talk about periodically, is love and truth are not opposites. Love is there is loving kindness, and truth are both integral to loving relationships, right? So I like to call it loving kindness or grace, you know, grace, and you know that they work together. They need to be together. You can't, it's really like toxic to have grace without truth telling. And it's very toxic to have truth telling without grace. If you can't hold those two together, you're going to have an unhealthy situation. And just kind of keeping that in mind as we think about how we relate to one another. How are we doing? And it's not that you have more of one and less of the other. No, you have lots and lots of both. And you keep having to have more and more of both instead of less of one and more of, yeah, you get what I'm saying around that. So yeah, that's all I would have to say.
It's fascinating for me to listen. Like I mentioned, I am not necessarily a part of a community, but have been friends of communities old and new. Particularly, I'm a student of Christian monasticism, communities that are very old. And when I think of the documents of monasticism, rules and life and stuff, and how do they deal with this topic, most of what you have brought up actually comes through. First, there's the atmosphere of non-judgment. Be aware of your own sins before you're ever conscious of another. And then a common practice in monasticism has been what they call the chapter of faults. Or now they're speaking of faults and affirmations. This pet peeves and affirmations. In Church of the Sojourners, there's no one represented from there. They regularly have a practice of mutual affirmation. So that's a similar kind of thing where we regularly admit our faults against the rule to one another. Another piece in monasticism is knowing your place. An admission of a personal or confrontation of something personal, you do one-on-one. If it's a matter of the rule, you do it in the chapter. And if it's a matter of correction or it's a community, then you go to appropriate authorities and you deal with it in like nonviolent communication or others, Matthew 18 or those sorts of ways. So that's another piece that monastic communities have dealt with, another one for a long time. Another example is visitations, which a couple of you have already mentioned. It's a regular practice for monasteries to have leaders, bishops, members of other monasteries to come and give a regular review and account of the nature of the relationships. And of course, among your group, the Shalom Mission Communities is really good at helping provide visitations back and forth. Or I think, Noel, you mentioned that Virgil Vogt came and visited. It's another one of those, hey, we need some help. Can you come over and help us? And this is really, these are common factors that have been a part of intentional communities for hundreds of years.
So I've got a, hello? So I guess I'll start with Toby, but anyone that can answer any of these questions, please. How do you sustain the no gossip policy? Do you use Matthew 18? Is there like a, what do they call it? Like a best practices list of I know Dave Ramsey has a no gossip policy in his organization. I'm interested to know how that happens. Anybody that has some thoughts on how I can Google the conflict plan. I've been looking at, I've visited dozens of communities over 30 years. I went to something called Celebrating Community from the Federation of Intentional Communities back in '93. And I was so impressed by all the young children that grew up in that environment that were just so much more awake and present than anything that I've ever seen. This is not necessarily just saying Christian, but I got my inspiration from living in a 2-bedroom apartment in New York City back in 1990 with 5 other Christian brothers, and it was the most difficult and the most amazing experience that I've ever had. And I've been on this quest to figure out the economic engine for sustaining communities. It was the first time I heard the word sustainability, but I've come to find that people that talk about sustainability and eco-villages and regenerative really don't want to hear about Jesus. And the people that are interested in Jesus, most of them don't really want to think about regenerative, holistic. I know that that's not completely true, but it's a thing, I promise you. So I'm here to learn and just figure out so I to some extent, I just want to be a fly on the wall, but if anybody has any thoughts on any of these, please let me know.
Thanks, Frank. We'll try to, anyone want to respond to Frank's question?
Frank, as I understood it, it had something to do with the no gossip rule and how it works, if I understood. And you know, I think Hope Fellowship doesn't per se have a no gossip rule, but another way perhaps of looking at it is we do very encourage any member that is coming and speaking to another member with something heavy, you know, that involves yet a third party within our church, that very quickly, you know, if it's obvious that that person is trying to process through what just happened or an idea that was shared or whatever, we listen. But if that person comes a second time, you know, with that same kind of wanting to mull it over or whatever, then really putting a stop to that and saying, it sounds like you need to really be working on forgiving this brother, sister, or whatever. You know, when we're married and we have our partner to kind of talk through and help us think through, okay, this just happened, how I feel about it. Some of us are verbal processors. Some of us are more internal in how we process, but people often need someone to process with. The problem comes when it moves from processing to just griping about someone and really not recognizing our role perhaps in it, or what we're going to do about it, how we're going to get to that place of forgiveness, of genuine forgiveness. So that's where, you know, putting the brakes on something that just becomes circular and the person is just dumping all the time, helping them see that that's what they're doing. And if we ourselves are not prepared to do that with them, of helping them get to, you know, talking it through how they can get to that place of forgiveness, then maybe getting some, in our case, someone on the pastoral team saying, it sounds like maybe you need to go speak to one of our pastors about this, but not giving them any more space in conversation to continue just, you know, the gossip, if you will, at that point. So that's a little bit of how we deal with it in Hope Fellowship.
Sorry. Doesn't Matthew 18, if you can't work it out with your brother, then bring a few, and if you can't work it out with a few, then take it to the group. Couldn't most of these things be handled that way? I guess the question would be, when does that not work?
I would say amen, Frank. Matthew 18 really is a guideline that we can use and should use. And just like you say, first go in love. That's the thing. If you're bringing a concern to somebody, it should be
If you're
because
going there
you
with a preconceived attitude, it's not going to work. But as long as you're really there in love and you want to, who was the one that said something about they had some strategies and some tools and they were still acting like teenagers? I see this all the time. I think there's a lot of 50-year-old teenagers out there, myself included sometimes, but it's an ongoing. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, so in community, the deeper our unity gets, the closer we are to each other, the more we can actually hurt each other, and the more important this forgiveness is. Just such a lifeline. I mean, as you can imagine in a marriage, if you can't forgive each other as partners, that's not going to last very long. And the same is definitely true for community. But that forgiveness should come because we love someone and we don't want them to see them go off the rails. We don't want to see them do something that's wrong. That's why we go to them in love. And they should be able to feel that love in our approach to us coming to them. having said all this, and I'll just say, you know, our late elder Christoph Arnold, he took forgiveness as he was a flag he was waving the whole time, and he just drilled it into us. You've got to forgive. And I remember one Easter time, we had realized we had these rules. We had the first law of Xanart's on the wall, but we had to recognize that actually all of us have like a little list of things that we just don't like about our brother down the hallway or someone in our community. And these things are like a bag of sand on your shoulder. And forgiveness, he would tell us, was something you also do for yourself. It's let that bag of sand fall off your shoulder and be freed from it. And a whole bunch of us just went through this little time of quiet and realizing we wanted to go through this. we need to forgive and love more fully. That's what makes our marriages thrive. It's absolutely fundamental to community. And it's something we never have. It's an ongoing project. We can never say we've got it figured out. It's something that the Spirit needs to prompt us every day how to do this.
Amen.
You know, ever since that church devoured itself, I've been on a journey of trying to fix myself. Because what I found out was all the problems, I couldn't do anything about anybody else. The only person I could do anything about was me. And I've been on this long journey of learning about how to forgive and how to get along with my brother. And it comes back to, I think it was Toby said this, that it comes back to Jesus Christ. And that's exactly right. Whether, you know, the 12-step program, if you got an alcohol problem or drug problem, you got to have a Jesus Christ. You got to have that higher power. But we've also got to learn how to come to terms. Most of the time when I can't forgive somebody, what I've learned about me is when I can't forgive somebody, it's because I have a problem in me. I have an old wound. I have an old trigger. I have an old whatever. And really, when I'm really hacked at another guy, I'm hacked at my reflection I see in my brother. That's what I've learned. And so I've been mentored, and I think what's missing in our churches and in our communities, and what I never got and had to go out and find, was somebody to mentor me and teach me how to do that. Because all I got at church was just, you know, doctrinal teaching and let's all be nice and let's all get along. And yeah, if I'd had somebody that could have mentored me in their journey and their struggle, but they're just a little further down the road and they've had some success, man, that would have been awesome.
I think that little bit that you just shared really does go a long way, though, when we actually are looking at the reflections of ourselves being projected onto our brother or sister. That's if we're not able to recognize that'll put us in hot water with one another pretty quickly. It looked like Garrett had his hand up, so I wanted to give him the floor.
Oh, I was just thinking about seems like there are a lot of steps before Matthew 18, and the passages that came to mind were, you know, Matthew 7 and Luke 6 about, you know, recognizing or calling out the speck in your brother's eye before you're aware of the log in your own eye. And I'm a verbal processor, so, you know, so this is a challenging topic to me because, you know, I think I self-justify quite a bit in the way I would, you know, talk about others in the name of trying to sort through what is the issue. Like, is this me and my sensitivity? Is this something about my character that makes me respond to this situation and getting off my center, or allowing that to disturb my peace in Christ, like that seems to me something I should be convicted about myself, or perhaps actually the wider context of that passage in Luke 6 is do not judge lest you be judged, and so it seems to me that there must be a step in recognizing, before you're approaching someone else, really making sure that you're clearly identifying that it is actually something not only that maybe affects other people, but also that it's not just my own sensitivity, my own inability to I don't know, just to put it in the right context, and truly to be not just approaching somebody because I've been wronged and that's my sense of self and maybe my own sense of selfishness, but truly like spending the time to discern what is it that is truly other centered, where they will learn. But seems like lots of process before you ever get to that point where you can winnow it down to what's actually going on, that's not just related to my response. So I just had those thoughts.
I would just add to that I think we erred on the side of too much of what you're saying, where it's, instead of just kind of trusting brothers and sisters and kind of bleh, just putting the mess out there to the community and being like, yeah, there's a lot of my stuff in here and I acknowledge that, so it's not like I'm coming with, but I think we tried to be too careful around process it all, get it all nice and cleaned up, know exactly. And then by then so much water is under the bridge that like, well, I probably don't need to bring it up now. So totally true what you're saying. I really agree with what you're saying. And I think sometimes we need to just trust, kind of like in marriage, we show up with our worst self sometimes, and yet we're loved, right? Like we can trust that we're going to be held in the messiness and maybe not so afraid of being confronted in the midst of that and saying, yeah, you're bringing this, but I see this in you, right? Where I think that we just did way too much tiptoeing and not enough trusting. And I feel like we're still working on that, like trust that we'll be held, trust that we won't be rejected, trust love, between us. And yeah, that's just, it takes a lot of time. And I think, over time, I think we're maybe a little better with it, but it's still always very challenging for us.
This is Megan from Reba. I agree with David. Forgiveness of yourself and looking at yourself is a good thing too. I live in a community household with 9 other people, different ages. I'm like one of the youngest, 40. There's a 35-year-old, up to a 94-year-old. So forgiveness is speaking the truth in love is necessarily and hard. Your heart needs to be right. Your attitude needs to be in the right place when you bring a hard situation to another brother or sister. It needs to be centered in Jesus, and it has to be out of a place of love and correction, and you need to be grounded yourself in. I'm still learning. I'm only 40. I'm still learning a lot. I'm probably the youngest person on the phone. Not on the phone, on this call. I'm still learning. Sally and Orwin, we was celebrating 65 years, so wish someone older than me from Reba would have been on this call, but they're not. But I'm here, and Reba's, no community is perfect. We're all working, especially Reba's working on things too. Just know we're not perfect. I'm not perfect, far beyond perfect, but loving yourself and forgiving yourself and learning to forgive others is a daily challenge, sometimes hourly challenge with housemates. And Mary Lou, I may email you later because I need advice from you later. Clearing is an awesome place. People's like, what makes community awesome and great? The people is the worst part and the best part. I can explain later if people want to know, but yeah.
I also connected a lot with what Mary Lou said about the tiptoeing. I'm naturally a very conflict avoidant person. And I got to a place where I realized being very conflict avoidant is also not a healthy way to go through life and love the people around me. So I began to practice, with the nonviolent communication and thought, and had a few conversations that were, that did clear up misunderstandings. And I thought, okay, I'm kind of getting the hang of this. And then I had one, not with someone in the community, but a different outside situation that really blew up. And the first thing that came to mind was, see, it's better to just avoid conflict completely. This is why I was like that. But I'm interested to hear from those of you who are naturally more conflict avoidant by nature. How did you learn to become more comfortable addressing things, and what did that look like for you or your community?
It's a weekly, daily process for me. I'm a people pleaser. I hate conflict. But when you live with 9 other people, you cannot avoid conflict. So I'm going to just be honest and brutal with everyone. I know this is recording, but you need to, sometimes you personally get triggered in conflicts, and knowing that it's not, you're being triggered, and that's hard. I'm learning that. I've talked to Sally. That's Sally's thing. Maybe you're being triggered. She's a wiser, older person. Maybe you're being triggered in this conflict, and step back and take a break and just deal with it. And sometimes if it's, I'm learning in household and community that sometimes the person you're in conflict with needs, especially in household, a day, or sometimes people can't deal with it that day. And say, I hear you're mad, or I hear you have whatever, you're frustrated, you can't talk now, but when you are ready, we need to have a talk, and not avoid it, not avoid it, but the person needs to be ready to talk to. Even if you're ready, you need to give that person, I don't know, space and time, and not when they're ready. And some conflicts are bigger than others. So I'm just a newbie, but Tony and Nancy have been there longer in the community. So it's a daily, I don't know, it's hard. Especially hard when people have stronger opinions than you, and it's knowing you're doing your best and you're loved by God I don't know, Beth, it's the work.
Thanks, Megan. I think it's encouraging to hear how all of us and each of us, in whatever setting and place we find ourselves, really struggle with the same things. The pride in each of us and the hurt, the hurt feelings. And yet Jesus calls each of us and all of us as in our fellowship to practice, to decide for love, to decide to forgive, and to remember that he said, you'll only be forgiven as you forgive. We're not pushing rules. Rules are not what we live together by. And yet, if there was any one thing we would say, this is a rule, it's the one that, it's this. We need to be open and go directly to each other to solve arguments, differences, hurt feelings, resentments, and go in a spirit of love and hope we're wrong and be ready to forgive and be ready to ask forgiveness. It is daily and it's lifelong and it's wonderful. but it's hard. So I find it very encouraging to hear from all the other communities around the continent, and I'm sure it would be the same in the rest of the world, that we all struggle with this, and yet we all are committed to, we need to do this, to stay together in peace and love with each other.
So I'm the newbie here too.
Welcome.
I'm also a newbie. I'm from Jesus People in Chicago, and I'm really a newbie to the to community life in general. My wife and I have only lived here for about 6 months, so I'm still learning this stuff. We're still in the honeymoon stage, so we haven't had too much conflict yet. It's been easy to avoid it because I tend to be pretty good at avoiding conflict as well. We've just had a small group. We have small group studies, and we just studied the book. Actually, just went through the book, Nonviolent Communication. And I think the more that we can learn tools like that, the more helpful it is in sort of wading into those things. I think there's a lot of times conflict can get worse because we jump into it too quickly, or it can get worse because we don't deal with it at all. And I think sort of having some of those tools like is offered in nonviolent communication, and lots of prayer, just prayerfully sort of wading into it, prayerfully walking into it, slowly walking into it. I'm 56 years old and I haven't figured this stuff out yet, but thank God for his grace and just day by day working through this. So anyway, glad to be here. I apologize for jumping in kind of late. I wasn't paying attention to the time difference. So anyway, glad to be here. So blessing.
Gary, thank you. We're happy to have you here. And I should have made it more clear that the 11 was Eastern time, and there are all the other time zones. So next time we'll spell those out across the country going west. If there's anyone who hasn't had a chance to share or speak or ask a question, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, I would just say, first of all, to Megan, I've got you beat by quite a few years. I'm 28, so I am hands down the youngest person here. But I appreciated the conversation about forgiveness, and coming up in the Bruderhof tradition here, we have a law of love, or first law of Xanarts. And for me personally, I see that as less of a rule that to enforce in my brothers and sisters here, but more as a way for me that if I view, people that I have issues with as a brother and sister, and truly love them and approach them in that way, that there's going to be no occasion for gossip or any sort of negativity. And different things that we differ on, our vision for the future, things like that, there's a time to speak and there's definitely a time to listen, and to not push my own ideas too far in those situations, assume that I'm wrong. I mean, these are things that I definitely struggle with daily, and sounds like I'll be struggling with it for quite a while. So anyway, I really appreciate the conversation this morning and hearing from all of you. There's a lot of wisdom on the screen here, and I look forward to hopefully meeting some of you at some point. It's just been really inspiring. So thank you.
Am I wrong in kind of saying that, well, a few people have mentioned being conflict avoidant, but is that not part of the water we're drinking right now as a society and a culture? I'm not sure if it's really of a personality type, but for instance, if there's people in the call who are conflict seekers, maybe we ought to hear from you. but yeah, that's a very human, very American, it's kind of the spirit of the age right now. And that's not to make an excuse, but that's a way to kind of normalize it for folks who might feel ashamed about that or find it really difficult. Speaking the truth in love and being fearful of conflict with folks. And I think what you say, Nate, is really important. That foundation of love and trust, and others have said it as well. if we can really learn to feel that with one another, that goes so far. Because if the fear is there, and Jesus is clear about this stuff, if we're afraid to talk to our brother and sister more so than love them, that's a more foundational problem than conflict resolution. There's something else going on there that has to be worked out. So yeah, a community that's held together by a rule of like making sure that you're talking to each other and tracking with people as far as conflict and whatnot. That community, I think, can only get you so far. But if there's the real grounding in trust and love in Christ, it's two different things that we're talking about at that point. And I'm hoping that the communities for Nurturing Communities Network are finding ways to be rooted and grounded in the love of Jesus. So
I don't know if this addresses what you were saying, Josh, or not, but like between Ted and I don't know if he's more conflict avoider and I'm more conflict, but I don't know if it's just timing. Like for me, it's like, okay, there's something going on here. Let's deal with it now. Let's get it out of the way. Let's take care of it. Let's, clean, deal with it and clean up after it and move on. And he's more,
this will pass.
Yeah, and let's see if this will pass. And so we have different styles, and sometimes that's conflict in between us because I want him to come in and join with me to force everybody to deal with it now. Oh, come on. But yeah, this is something we deal with continually, with our different styles.
And Andrea, I can relate to that. I mean, if there's an atmosphere of unease in a household or in a community, or the walking on eggshells sort of thing, I hate that. So there's something in me that wants to eliminate that immediately. But that's me operating out of my fear also. If I really am trying to love somebody who might need that space to process it, who might need that time. Again, this is not to avoid it or to brush it under the rug, which can inevitably happen, as Mary Lou has said, if we're not on top of it. But still, there's ways in which my wanting to deal with it now is not rooted out of love, but it could be rooted out of not wanting to feel uncomfortable. So
right. And then the other thing that we have, at least in the way our community is that because we work with students and the great age difference, and so being the leaders is sometimes I'm going in and I'm getting, to get rid of it, the situation or to take care of it, and I need to stop and back off. And so we have between us, we have a code word that helps me cease and desist when I need to. And so he'll say scrambled eggs, which is a word that doesn't meet most situations. So it gets my attention, even when I am upset and just, intensely going into something. He'll say scrambled eggs. And of course, this is built on trust, that I trust him and I entrust his integrity in the situation. And then I know, okay, stop. This isn't productive. This isn't helpful for the community, for the relationships, for what's going on. And I trust him that then he and I will figure it out, and then we'll come back at it in a healthy way later. So that's just been a very useful tool for us.
Thank you. Need all the tools we can get. But I do want to say, Josh, thanks for saying what you said. And I've, that's certainly my and our experience as well, that love and forgiveness is the basis. And we need to trust each other, and we have to work on that. I need to work and struggle for that in my own heart, to come back and decide, we have to trust each other. If there's something hindering that, I need to deal with it, work on it, get help. But yes, it's one of the lines from our guidance on this, from our foundations, his relationships within and to the church community are spiritual bonds based on trust and on the readiness to forgive again and again. And that's just been helpful and a good guide. Brothers in Little Bear Creek, has this been helpful or encouraging to you? We'd love to hear your voice once more or twice.
Certainly, very helpful, very, very interesting. I don't know that I have a lot to contribute, but at Little Bear Creek here, we do try to live by the law of standards. We fail a lot. And also a number of us came from a church background where we had adult baptism, and part of our baptism commitment was the use of Matthew 18, kind of all three steps as it's spelled out there. And that's something that we commit to here. So we have some of those things in place and almost constantly in our minds, but that doesn't it gives you something good, something to work with, but we are still working on how to make that apply in everyday life and in nuanced situations. And I have lived my entire life, which isn't very long, among people who have done this for centuries, and yet as a people group, they're still trying to figure it out. It's definitely been much better than what you see in society at large, but it's a constant work, like people have been saying here, and we're here to learn from you all.
I have a friend who has 400 acres in northern New Mexico, and he came from the Rudolf Steiner camp. And one of their rules was that you had to have 5 years of community experience before you could come live there, in hopes that people wouldn't try to bring all their unresolved family issues to the table. I don't know if that's actually possible, because I have more than 5 years collectively now, but I didn't at the time. It's not a simple. It's not a simple thing, but I'm interested. But it seemed like that's probably one of the subtexts or one of the issues, that if people are, we don't know what we don't know, or that if there's unresolved family trauma, that we're still acting out because we haven't dealt with it. That has to be an issue that comes up all the time in one form or another. Yes? Toby?
This. Sure. And there are ways, you're saying unresolved family trauma. I wouldn't say, where I live, it's coming up all the time, but that's, I guess, we are depending on God's grace to allow a group of people to work together for common purpose and love and harmony and unity among us. And the day-to-day work of forgiving and asking each other forgiveness and encouraging each other to live for God's kingdom, and caring for each other and all the daily aspects, the daily challenges of being all in, of committing our whole life. And this, I think, all of us are doing in our place, in our setting, responding to a call on our lives that we feel. So all to say, yes, unresolved trauma is part of all of our lives, each of our lives. It can be healed. Redemption can be given, and often we experience that, and sometimes it takes a long, long time. I think everyone will have experience with this. Josh, what are your thoughts as we wrap up? It's nearly the end of our time.
Yeah, I would just like to say that I'm very thankful for everyone sharing where they're at. This is a tough one. This is one of those things. I remember years ago at one of the, I don't know if any of you ever heard of the Papa Festival, which was a kind of a collection of new monastic intentional Christian community. There's a guy walking around there with a t-shirt that said, "I survived intentional Christian community." And you know, it's not for the glamorous and weak at heart, so to speak, but it is for full of joy, a life of joy. And I love that it comes in all shapes and sizes. And I love that there are folks that still have enough hope to start something new. In my stage in life, I can't imagine. I got a lot going on. I can't imagine trying that at this point. But we've been there. We've tried new ventures and working with young people who some of the stuff is just totally foreign. It's just really encouraging because I think about the state of our churches right now and just the lack of. The church has been such a commodified sort of institution. The lack of intimacy in our churches is part of what's contributing to the deterioration. So I do think that those of us who are committed to this kind of radical discipleship in Christ that is willing to kind of go deep with one another is a real gift for the church at large. And I hope we can see ourselves as that.
Is there anyone who would still like to share something? Otherwise, we'll.
Yeah, I just want to amen what Josh was saying. You know, we're not this huge, big community, but the world sees you. I have people coming up to me all the time telling me stuff they knew I did. I don't know how they knew, except that the rural area around us, they see the light. And I know that's true in every one of these communities. They may not come knocking on your door, but they see the light. So I just want to encourage you in that.
Thank
Can
you. Go ahead.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
So as I was just listening, I just got curious, and I thought of one like historical incident relating to conflict and forgiveness, and that's the Moravian community. I learned that during their early beginning, they had lots of conflict. They had lots of stress coming in as an exile into Germany. And at that moment, the conflict became too serious and they doubted whether they could go on as a community. But all of a sudden, like the Holy Spirit comes upon the community in the worship setting. And from that moment, the community is reborn. So the conflict was a threat for the survival of community, but somehow by God's grace, out of that serious conflict, the community is renewed and filled with the Spirit, and and is able to carry on what God had planned for them. So I was just curious if one or two communities had that kind of experience out of that conflict, very bleak, dark situation, something by God's grace turning around, and from that moment, experienced renewal.
Yes, I will say we have. Any of my brethren, sister from our community want to say a word further about that? But yes, we have experienced in the midst of a severe, difficult struggle or crisis that something comes to us that melts every heart and changes the whole picture within, just something comes and moves us and changes us, and it's God's grace and his mercy. It's when we're willing to see each other see ourselves as the worst, as hindrances, as obstacles, and lay down our pride and say, forgive me, I was the problem. But
I think another key about that, Toby, is that hope and expectancy too. Like if there's an expectancy from a community for the Spirit, that's key, because there could be a crisis, there can be conflict, but if people are feeling hopeless and they're not feeling like there's a way past it, then there's not much. People are in their hearts kind of throwing in the towel already. The Spirit's not going to coercively break through that. But if we're willing to open ourselves, if we're willing to open our hearts, if we're open our minds to the possibilities of something brand new being given to us, I think the Spirit works with that. So there's a sense of posture that goes into that as well. It's not just like there's this community there that could magically be overrun by God's grace, but I guess the argument could be made that this earth is being magically overrun by God's grace, but as far as it's actually taking root on the ground and it being a tangible expression, I think God's looking for a people to open up their arms and their hearts and their hands.
Amen. Yes, I agree. Well, go ahead.
Megan's not here. She had to leave early, but in the earlier history of Reba Place Fellowship, I think it's in the Glimpses of Grace book that recounts some of Reba's history. There's a really good story about them reaching a crisis point in their own sense of direction, and then ultimately coming to a place where people forgave one another, and it was just almost like you say a Moravian moment. It was really nice. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. It's been a joy to be together. I think we've been an hour and a half and shared a lot. I think we should all be encouraged and spurred on toward the goal by this exchange. And it's been a joy to be with each and every one. Let's stay connected. You have the list of others with their towns and communities. Check the website for the next meetings. And we hope to meet again. And then this fall in October is the big Nurturing Communities International get-together at Camp Lucan Campground, when everyone who can should come and share in person for 2 or 3 days.
Can you say where is that campground that you just mentioned?
It's in Kentucky. And the details are on the Nurturing Communities website under gatherings.
Okay.
I can send you more specifics. We're just starting to plan, and we'll post details as they're forthcoming.
Thank you.
All right. Go in peace, everyone. Stay warm, stay well, and we'll meet again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Thanks so much.
Bye.